Verse number 25 says, "And it came to pass, when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said unto Laban, Send me away, that I may go into mine own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served thee, and let me go, for thou knowest my service, which I have done thee. And Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry, for I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake. And he said, Appoint me thy wages, and I will give it. And he said unto him, Thou knowest how I have served thee, and how thy cattle was with me. For it was little which thou hadst before I came, and is now increased unto a multitude. And the Lord hath blessed thee since my coming. And now when shall I provide for my own house also? And he said, What shall I give thee? And Jacob said, Thou shalt not give me anything, if thou wilt do this thing for me. I will again feed and keep thy flock. I will pass through all thy flock today, removing from thence all the speckled and spotted cattle, and all the brown cattle among the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and of such shall be my hire. So shall my righteousness answer for me in time to come, when it shall come for my hire before thy face. Everyone that is not speckled and spotted among thy goats, and brown among the sheep, that shall be counted stolen with me. And Laban said, Behold, I would it might be according to thy word." In this study, we're looking at chapter 30, the rest of chapter number 30, and then chapter number 31. You're going to see there is so much going on between Jacob and Laban, and then Rachel and Leah. And what you find is that everyone in this story is looking for what they can get out of it. That's what's happening. And, one thing that you learn about human nature, that is, mankind doesn't really change. We see ourselves in this story. And if you'll let it, I think there's a lot we can learn from it. Now, Jacob, he makes this agreement here to mark the cattle that are marked, that it would be those that would be his. And what we also see is that Jacob is going to try to manipulate the outcome, but all the while, you're going to find that Laban is changing things with Jacob continually to where it favors Laban. And what Jacob's going to learn is that Jacob can try to manipulate a situation, but God's the one that's in control. And we'll see that as we go along. So Jacob and Laban, they make this agreement here. We've already read these verses, but we see that Jacob prepares to leave after Joseph's birth here. Jacob desires to return to his own country after these 14 years now, and he requests to just have what is his, that he can leave. However, Laban stops him. And notice why Laban wants him to stay. It's not because, your family, I really hate to see my daughters go. I really hate to see my grandsons go, my granddaughter to go. No, that's not the reason why Laban doesn't want him to leave. Notice what he says here in verse number 27. Verse number 27, And Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry. And here's the reason why he doesn't want him to leave. For I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake. You see why Laban doesn't want Jacob to leave? It's not, I'm going to miss my daughters, I'm going to miss my grandchildren. I've learned by experience that I have benefited from you being here. It's what Laban gets. And you know what you find? The world is especially like that. What can I get out of you? Oh, I don't really want you to leave. Well, if I'm such a good employee, why haven't you paid me, the workman's worthy of his hire? If I'm so important to you, why haven't you compensated that? Laban is in it for what Laban can get out of it. That's Laban's nature, and Laban's not going to change. But here's the thing. Jacob is also looking out for Jacob. And here in a little bit, you're going to find that Rachel and Leah are looking out for Rachel and Leah. Folks, unfortunately, you find that today. That's why I say mankind doesn't change. Mankind is looking out for himself. And let's be honest. Let's be honest. If we can just be honest for just a minute, Many times when we get pushed in a corner, we're looking out for me. Are you not? How's this going to affect me? How are the tax increases going to affect me? How is that change going to affect me? Am I going to be made uncomfortable? Oh, it doesn't feel good. Oh, the heat's 2 degrees too warm. Oh, it's too cool. It's too hot. It's too... the government's going to take a little bit more. It's not. Well, I wonder how that brother's affected. I wonder how that sister's affected. I wonder how it's going on for them. And we've got to step out of our comfort zone and think about the other person. Laban's not thinking about Jacob. In fact, Laban's not even really thinking about his daughters. And again, you're going to see that. You're going to see that in this story. And here's the other thing that we notice, and this is just something to note as Bible believers. Do you understand that the King James Bible here says that Laban has learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake? Doesn't that make sense? Don't you learn by experience as you watch something that Laban has learned by experience by watching how things have improved for Laban over these last 14 years, that Jacob is beneficial to him. But you know what the NIV says? I've learned by divination. That sounds like witchcraft. That sounds like, why would you want to change that? Unless there's money to be made. Right? Unless you want to cast doubt on the Word of God. Unless you want to make Laban look like is practicing witchcraft, right? There's no reason for that. It makes sense that he's learned by experience that Jacob is beneficial to him. And so it's something to remember. So Laban offers an opportunity to set wages for Jacob. So what does Jacob do? Laban gives him that offer. Jacob's offered to work for specially marked cattle. We see that here. You have those that are speckled and spotted. You have those that are brown cattle among the sheep and spotted and speckled among the goats. And note and understand something, that cattle in the Word of God can mean more than sheep and goats. It can mean, of course, beef cattle as well. But majority, and we see that because the Bible explains itself here, that the cattle mentioned here are goats and sheep. But cattle can be sheep, goats, cows in Scripture. And know too that this type of culture, the Oriental culture, East, majority-wise you'd find sheep and goats. And usually they're plain or plain white or plain black. So to have these spotted and speckled for Laban, he's thinking, this is a pretty good deal, right? Hey, I'm going to get all the cattle, and Jacob is just going to get the few that are left. So again, Laban's thinking about Laban. We've already learned that. I mean, it wasn't beneath him to use his daughters as pawns in this scheme. Remember, just the last chapter. So Jacob vowed to deal honestly with Laban, verse number 33. He says, so shall my righteous answer for me in time to come, when it shall come for my hire before thy face. Everyone that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and brown among the sheep shall be counted stolen with me. In other words, if you find those with me, I've stole those from you. But I promise you that's not going to happen. I'm going to deal honestly with you. So what does Laban do? Oh, Laban agrees to this. This sounds good, right? I'm going to have the majority. Well, let's just see how that plays out, right? Verse number 35, it says, and Laban here, he removed that day the he-goats that were ring-straked and spotted, and all the she-goats that were speckled and spotted, and every one that had some white in it, and all the brown among the sheep, and gave them into the hand of his sons. And he set 3 days' journey betwixt himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. So Jacob's getting to business. He's going to uphold his side of the bargain. But notice something. Jacob's not learned yet that the outcome should be left to the Lord. Notice what Jacob does. Verse number 37. And Jacob took him rods of green poplar and of hazel and chestnut trees, and peeled white strakes in them, and made the white appear which was in the rods. And he set the rods which he had peeled before the flocks in the gutters, in the watering troughs, when the flocks came to drink, that they should conceive when they came to drink. And the flocks conceived before the rods, and brought forth cattle ring-straked, speckled, and spotted. And Jacob did separate the lambs, and set the faces of the flocks toward the ring-straked, and all the brown in the flock of Laban. And he put his own flocks by themselves, and put them not among Laban's cattle. And it came to pass, whensoever the stronger cattle did conceive, that Jacob laid the rods before the eyes of the cattle in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the cattle were feeble, he put them not in. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's. Jacob is still trying to get the upper hand. Jacob's trying to control his outcome. You see what's happening? And notice something else. Now, he does do this. He pulls his cattle out because they're already his. And what is he doing? And then he's taking Laban's cattle. And folks, you say, well, what does this all mean? I've not figured that out. I don't know how this works. Okay? You got something on it? Feel free to share later. That's fine. But I still don't know if anybody really knows what's going on here. But whatever it is, it's working for him. But what you're going to find out is Laban's going to continue to change the agreement. Because Laban's Laban. He sees it's not going well, he's going to change it again. He's going to change it again. And we'll see that in just a little bit when he talks to Rachel and Leah about these things. And so what does he do? Well, he's making sure that the stronger cattle are conceiving ring-straked, spotted, and speckled. But when they're weak, hey, I don't want those, right? Now, you can also say he's pretty smart, but he's trying to manipulate the outcome. And boy, when we try to manipulate the outcome, what happens? It blows up in our face, and that's what's going to happen, folks. So he increases his cattle and his servants. Notice here, it's not just the cattle. It says, and the man increased, verse number 43, exceedingly. Exceedingly. I mean, he got strong. To the point he's stronger than his father-in-law. He's stronger than his father-in-law's sons. Notice, and had much cattle, and maidservants, and men servants, and camels, and asses. He's growing at an alarming rate. Now, all this success can't last before trouble brews. Notice chapter number 31. This is where we're going to kind of focus the rest of our time in our lesson this morning. Verse number 1, it says, and he heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all this glory. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. Do you know what happens time and time again when you're successful? Someone's not going to be happy. Now, sometimes maybe it's warranted, but most of the time it's not. You see today's society. Business is successful. They must have gotten their ill-gotten. Why? I mean, maybe. Very likely in today's society, maybe. But maybe not. Historically, if you take the time to study business history, you take the time to study American history, a lot of your brands, people worked hard. I mean, you know, Brother Jonathan, I could start giving you all kinds of history, and that's not the point. But I'll give you one instance. Your Heinz ketchup you enjoy, H.A. Heinz, before he was successful with that, he was locked up because he couldn't pay his creditors. He went to jail for a while in the U.S. When he finally got out, he didn't want to settle for just being so-so. He tried again, and then his business took off to the point. Canning was his business, and look at Heinz today. Now I know there's some corruption there now. But the original owner, he worked hard for where he got, and that's what a lot of your colleges don't teach today. It's corrupt. Let's spin it and make everything, it would be so much better on socialism. Really? Christianity and good capitalism has really built this country in a great way. And I could give you so many other names if you were to take the time to study it out. What does Jacob do? Now again, we know Jacob's trying to manipulate the situation, but Jacob has worked hard. What happens? Laban's sons are upset. Laban's not happy. Notice here that Laban's countenance had changed. Now, we not long ago, I know I taught some on countenance. Pastor has taught on countenance, so I'm not going to take too much time here. But I do want to mention a couple of things. Number one, we see that he hears the word of Laban's sons, and they're accusing Jacob of taking of that was his. Well, that's not true. He's worked for what he's got. They talked about Jacob openly. You know what you find? This is what the world does. And unfortunately, it's in Christians too. You'll talk about something just enough so people hear it. Oh, they heard it. Well, no, you wanted them to hear it. You wanted to hurt somebody. You wanted them to finally hear about it, or they accidentally hear about it. But notice, they wanted Jacob to hear it, but indirectly. They wanted this to come about, but not openly, right? And this kind of tactic is found in the world, and it's a cowardly tactic. You got a problem with somebody, go tell them. Go to their face, but we don't do that anymore. We pull a phone out and we write it on social media. We pull a phone out and we tell somebody, "Hey, I'm never seeing you again," because it's on text. We're a cowardly generation. We can't look someone in the eye and tell them what problems we have with them, and openly talk about it and have dialogue and deal with it and come to terms. And like I said at the start of this, mankind hasn't changed. What does Jacob's sons do? They talk about him. Then Laban, he's not going to tell Jacob he has issue, but obviously his countenance has changed. So they accuse Jacob of stealing that which belonged to Laban. And this is hypocritical. And this is especially considering how Laban had tricked Jacob with the marriage of Rachel, with how he'll change his wages 10 times between the start of this agreement to the end of this agreement. That's a cowardly thing, because Laban has done all these things to Jacob. It's true on both sides in a way. You can't have both. We also see this as an extreme exaggeration considering how he had added to Laban's wealth. Remember, what had Laban just said at the start of this contract? "I have learned by experience that you've benefited me," right? Well, then it's not true that Jacob had taken everything away. Laban was a strong man himself. But again, people can't stand to see the good prosper. This world cannot stand to see the Lord and the Lord's things prosper without having to fight it, either verbally or physically. And it's not true that he had taken all the livestock. Notice here, what did they say here? But hath taken, verse number 1, hath taken away all that was our father's. Laban still has cattle. Do you know what people do? They say, "Well, they've got all of the glory. I'm doing everything." Wait, really? Think about the children of Israel. Think about the children of Israel and how they exaggerated their predicaments. But God had taken care of them. We have nothing to eat except this light bread. Well, then you got something to eat. Have you ever done that though? Have you ever been there? Have you ever, and you start talking and you just say something, then all of a sudden you say something and go, and someone says, "Wait a minute. Well, say that again." "I think you got clothes. I think you got a roof over your head. You did eat yesterday. There's nothing to eat. You got 5 different flavors of chips. You got sandwich meat. You got steak. You look at the freezer. You just are tired of it. You're bored of what you have, but you got something to eat." Can we all say we've gotten that way? So the sons of Laban are exaggerating the situation. And this conversation was not honorable. They're trying to honor themselves, but they're envious. That's the problem. Maybe they need to ask for the Lord's help and to grow their livestock, right? And so you got to be careful of that. Now the other thing is, and I said I'm not going to take too long here, but Jacob notices the countenance of his father-in-law, and it's not the same as it had been. We understand countenance had changed here, and countenance means behavior, bearing, conduct, manners. It can also be, we know, the outward appearance, the demeanor, the conduct of someone. Countenance is the face, but can also be the interaction as well. And we've studied that at length. But just a couple of things on the understanding of countenance. Let me mention this. And again, I don't want to take too long, but a countenance can fall. It can change. It can be made glad. It can be made sad. It can be lifted up. It can be fierce. It can fool or disinform. Some people are good at that. You ever heard the term poker face? Because you don't let someone know what's really going on. I've been told I don't have a very good one. And there's certain ways to figure that out. But a countenance can be made beautiful. It can be full of pride. Psalm 10:4 says this, "The wicked through the pride of his countenance will not seek after God. God is not in all his thoughts." The other thing that we see is, furthermore, we understand that Moses' countenance was made glorious. When was it made glorious? When he come down off the mount. Remember, 2 Corinthians 3:7 talks about that. So a countenance can be prideful, but it can also be made glorious. And so again, just that information there. And so we see Laban's sons and Laban's countenance. And so Jacob here, he testifies about this. And back in our context here, it says in verse number 2, we saw that Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban. Verse number 3 of chapter number 31 of Genesis says, "And the Lord said unto Jacob, Return into the land of thy fathers and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock, and said unto them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not toward me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me. And ye know that with all my power I have served your father, and your father hath deceived me, and changed my wages 10 times, but God suffered him not to hurt me." Now, I'm sure Laban did change his wages 10 times. And part of that was his response to, obviously, what Jacob was doing. Maybe he didn't know how Jacob was doing it. He was manipulating the outcome. But so Laban hasn't been fair with Jacob. And Jacob truly hasn't been fair with Laban. That's why I say everybody in this story is looking out for themselves, trying to manipulate the outcome. Laban is it's much more obvious. Okay, instead of the ring straight and speckled, let's do this. Oh, let's go back to this. Well, let's do this. That's what Laban's doing. But Jacob, meanwhile, is over here. All right, pull the rods out, put the rods in, change this up. Hey, I'm just going to keep doing this. But notice that in all of this, you know what Jacob's got to learn? God's still blessing him. Do you know what we have to learn? Instead of trying to manipulate somebody or manipulate an outcome or try to deceive somebody, because that's what it is. We like to use the word manipulation, but that's just another word for deceiving. Why don't we just let God deal with the outcome and quit trying to control things that we shouldn't control? We'd be a lot happier. He says, you know that with all my power I've served your father. And I do believe Jacob had. Okay? I really do. And so he tells Rachel and Leah here what's happened. And if he said thus, the speckled shall be thy wages. Notice, and I'm sure this is true, then all the cattle bear speckled. Well, yeah, they bared speckled because of what you did. And if he said thus, the ring straight shall be thy hire, then bear all the cattle ring straight. Thus God hath taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. And it came to pass at the time that the cattle conceived that I lifted up mine eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ring straight, speckled, and grizzled. And the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here am I. And he said, Lift up now thine eyes and see, all the rams which leap upon the cattle are ringstraked, speckled, and grizzled. For I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar, and where thou vowest a vow unto me. Now arise, get thee out of from this land, and return into the land of thy kindred. And so he tells him, he gives us account of how the Lord's come to him and told him how he needs to go back home and what he needs to do. Notice Rachel and Leah's response in all of this. And I think this is where you see the other side. And there's a couple things I want to point out here, and we have time to do it. It says, And Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, Is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not counted of him strangers? For he hath sold us, and hath quite devoured also our money. For all the riches which God hath taken from our father, that is ours, and our children's. Now then, whatsoever God hath said unto thee, do. Now, if you just read that, you say, oh yeah, they agree with what he should do, and they agree with the Lord. Read it. No, I don't mean read it right now. Just if you take a minute to examine what's being said, on the surface, again, if you just read it, say, oh, well, they're agreeing with what Jacob needs to do, that, they're following what the Lord commanded him. Yeah, but it's not for the reason you'd think. See, sometimes folks do spiritual things not because they're spiritual. Sometimes they do it because it improves their situation. It looks good for them. It's in their court. Oh, I come to church because it gives me connections. I come to church because I'm interested in this person. I come to church because it improves my standing in the community. I go here because it benefits me. You know what Rachel and Leah are saying? There's bitterness down in the hearts of these girls. They're distanced from their father. They'll do anything to improve their situation. But they're not agreeing with Joseph and with God because it's the right thing to do. They're agreeing with Jacob because it benefits them. Because notice how they answer. And Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, Is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Where's our cut? What's in it for us? Did I tell you at the start of this lesson that everybody's looking out for me? That's what they just said there. Now, I'm not saying they're not right, but their heart's not in the right place. Their heart says, where's my portion? And this is the way these girls have been. Because remember how Leah was trying to up her sister and Rachel was trying to up her sister? And look, there's bitterness here. There's hardness here. And listen, this all traces back to what their home life was like. This all traces back to the way I don't think Laban considered his daughters' hearts and his manipulation with Jacob. He used Leah as a pawn. He used Rachel as a pawn. I got 7 years out of Jacob. But where's your daughter in all this, buddy? And listen, we got to think about our children and the decisions we make, what we do in our jobs, in our business, in our church, where we go to church. How's it affecting their spiritual life? We many times make decisions. I tell you what really, and I pray the Lord always helps me not to do this, but what really bothers me is when I hear about people saying, oh, I got to take a job over here because the business is changing, or it's going to require me to be over here. Okay, where's the best community to live in? Oh, that looks like a great house. That's a gorgeous house. Okay, I'm going to go tell the boss I can move. Oh, I guess we need to think about a church. Oh, there's no church there. Oh, well, I guess we'll stream it or we'll drive an hour. Shouldn't the church have been one of the first things you need to think about? Okay, what kind of church is it? Does it believe right? Do they use the right Bible? What's their beliefs? How's the church going to be? They have the right standard? Is everything? Do they check all the boxes? Okay, is it going to be a good place for my family? But first and foremost, what does the church believe? Okay, then we can move there. Okay, boss, I think we might be able to. I got to figure out housing and stuff, and I'm 90% sure it's going to be a good place there spiritually for my family. Now I got to. But people are making decisions based upon their pocket, not based upon their spiritual pocket. See what Rachel and Leah are doing? Their first answer, and I'll tell you, many times the first 5 minutes with somebody, if they're honest, again, not manipulating, what's the gut reaction? The gut reaction is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our Father's house? Is that all you're worried about? Are we not counted for Him as strangers? Now, I think that's true. And that answers the problem with the first question. Laban had done this to his daughters, and I'll show you why. We got just a few more minutes. But notice something here. Notice something. Notice verse number 17. Then Jacob rose up and set his sons and his wives upon camels. What does he do? He's going to get out of Dodge, right? And he carried away all his cattle and all his goods, which he had gotten, and the cattle of his getting, which he had gotten in Padan Aram, for to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. And Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. Notice what Rachel's doing. I couldn't get any inheritance from Dad, so I'm going to at least take what I can. See where someone's heart is? And I'll be honest with you, I think Rachel's worse than Leah. But Laban doesn't think that, and you'll see that in just a minute. And Jacob stole away unawares to Laban the Syrian, in that he told him not that he fled. So he fled with all that he had, and he rose up and passed over the river and set his face toward Mount Gilead. And it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob was fled, and he took his brethren with him and pursued after him 7 days' journey, and they overtook him in the Mount Gilead. And God came to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night, and said unto him, Take heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. Then Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the Mount of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, What hast thou done, that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters as captives taken with the sword? Wherefore didst thou flee away secretly, and steal away from me, and didst not tell me that I might have sent thee away with mirth, and with songs, with tabret, and with harp? And hast not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters, thou hast now done foolishly in so doing. It is in the power of my hand to do you hurt. But the God of your father spake unto me yesternight, saying, Take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. And now, though thou wouldest needs to be gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house, yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods? Now, let me just break this down really quick. God intervened. We don't know what Laban would have done if God hadn't intervened, but Laban changed his tune after God intervened. God was working on Jacob's behalf, folks. Laban, I don't know if Laban would have. Maybe Laban would have. I'm not sure what we can let Laban, what we would say about Laban, what he might do if he wasn't, if God hadn't put brakes on Laban, right? But here's the thing: God told him not to speak either good or bad. What's Laban do? Why didn't you let me send you off with a party? You didn't offer a party when Jacob wanted to leave the first time. I don't think you were really going to do that. People will say anything. Listen, this world will say anything for you to sign on the dotted line. This world will say anything for you to do something for them, and they don't follow through. Laban is acting like a man of the world here. Laban will do anything, promise anything. Hey, everybody will have a new car. I'll buy cell phones for everybody. Everything's going to be grand. 4 years later, economy is worse than it's ever been. That promise really stayed true. And I didn't say which party, folks. Just saying. Just saying. Laban is saying anything he can to make Laban look good. Listen, sometimes we act like the world. Sometimes we promise things and we don't follow through. We need to check our heart at the door of God's doorstep. Better not to vow than to vow and have to show that you're not who you say you are. So what does he do? Well, Laban really shows what he's really after in verse number 30. Because thou sore longest after thy father says, yet, wherefore hast thou stolen my gods? Oh, that's why you're here. Your riches have been taken. Your gods have been taken. Finally got around to telling why he's really there. I wonder if you'd have really pursued. You think someone stole your stuff. Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid. For I said, peradventure thou wouldest take by force thy daughters from me. With whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live, before our brethren discern that thou what is in thine with me, and take it to thee. For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen him. You think Jacob would have offered to have someone put to death if he'd known that Rachel had him? That's his bride. He had no idea. Now, I want you to notice a couple of things. Look where Laban goes, because you can see a lot in someone's heart in the direction their feet goes first, and you can see what's on their mind and who they really trust. Notice, and Laban went into Jacob's tent. Well, he doesn't trust Jacob as far as we like to say in the South, as I can throw him. Notice where he goes next, and into Leah's tent. Doesn't really trust her. And in the two maidservants' tents. Can't find it. But he found them not. Then when he out of Leah's tent, you know what it sounds like? He went into Leah's tent the second time. Look where he finally winds up. And he entered into Rachel's tent. Do you know who he trusted the most? Was the girl that had taken care of his sheep. He thought, surely Rachel wouldn't have it. But I can't find it anywhere else. Daddy's baby girl is the one that's deceiving everybody. Now Rachel had taken the images and put them in the camel's furniture and set upon them. And Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. And she said unto her father, let it not displease my lord, that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of women is upon me. And he searched, but found not the images. Oh, she is so manipulative. Oh, okay, that's okay, honey. I understand. Let me just look. I knew you wouldn't have it anyway. I'm sure it's somewhere out here, but I knew you wouldn't have it. He leaves. Do you know what Rachel's doing? She's deceiving, just like her father, and just like everybody else in the story. And listen, listen, if you're like this, ladies, if you're like this, men, if you're like this in your home, you're causing problems in your home. You're causing trouble. You're troubling the house if you are a manipulative, deceiving person. Because it's caused, here's what happens. Notice what happens. Because of Rachel's deception, because of Rachel's manipulation, because of what she's doing here, notice what friction it causes. And Jacob was wroth and chode with Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? And what is my sin that thou hast so hotly pursued after me? Whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, what hast thou found of all thy household stuff? Nothing. Give me one. Laban, what? You have not even found a thread. And you come after me like I'm a criminal. What's Rachel just done? She's caused friction between her father and her husband. And listen, you can cause friction, you can cause trouble in your house. You can tear the walls of your house down. The Proverbs talks about that. Or you can build it up. It's your choice. You spew your displeasure, you spew your stuff, then you're going to cause the walls to fall down. Or you can build it up. And I'm talking to ladies, but I'm talking to men too. You can do the same thing with how you are. He says, whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, which thou hast found all that thy household stuff, set it here before my brethren and thy brethren, that they may judge betwixt us. Hey, come on. Let's have the jury right here. My brethren and your brethren, they can decide who's right. Well, his hands are empty. Why? Because Rachel's in the tent sitting on it. This 20 years have I been with thee. Thy ewes and thy she-goats have not cast their young, and the rams of thy flock have I not eaten. That which was torn of beast, I brought not unto thee. I bear the loss of it. Of my hand didst thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. He goes on. He talks about how he's dealt for him, how he's taken the loss. There's times he's eaten the problems and not brought it to him. He's been a good employee, so to speak, and took care of it and never said a word about it. Hey, I paid for that and never brought you a receipt for it. And here you are coming after me like I've stolen something from you. Rachel's deception has caused friction. And he goes on, verse 42, except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely thou hast sent me away now empty. But God hath seen my affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked thee yesternight. And Laban answered and said unto Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and these cattle are my cattle, and all that thou seest is mine. And what can I do this day unto these my daughters, or unto their children which they have borne? Now therefore come thou and let us make a covenant. He says, look, why would I harm any of them? They're my daughters. They're my grandsons. They're my children. But again, Rachel's deception has caused all this friction. And listen, folks. Listen. The way Laban has treated his daughters and the way now Rachel is deceiving can cause an uproar. And it has. The same can happen in families in this church. It can happen in families out there if you don't watch what you're doing. Are you walking with God? Are you making sure that what you speak out of your mouth is either nurturing words or destructive words? Because it's in the power of your hand. Ephesians 6:4 tells us, and you fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. That ought to be our prayer as parents, as grandparents, as adults that are influential in children's lives. Now, I don't have time. We're out of time, but let me just say this. We see here that Laban and Jacob make this covenant. They put a heap of a pillar. They make a pillar of rocks. And then they agree that neither one would pass over and harm either one of each other. They make an agreement before God, a covenant before God. But you know what happened here? Yeah, they make a covenant. But we don't have a record that Laban ever visited. We don't have a record that Laban ever saw his grandsons again. And it was all because, number one, how Laban was with his daughters. And number two, we see how Rachel deceived. This story could have been different.